Well, I thought I'd begin this evening just to circle back momentarily to an old teaching I shared here in connection with the teachings of the Huayan on interdependence, and that was derived from a very important contemporary thinker, Donna Haraway, and her guidance to us that in these times, and given the truth of interdependence, that it's really essential that we make odd kin. By that, she means finding our interconnectedness with all the beings on this planet. She referred to those as odd kin. We need to expand our network of who we consider kin. And we've had certain other religious traditions, certainly Christianity comes to mind, that have taught about universal brotherhood and sisterhood. And Donna Haraway is just taking that another step. And nature occasionally, maybe more often than occasionally, gives us examples of that. And there was a beautiful example. This comes from the Plain Dealer of a few weeks ago, but it's been a while since I've been here, so I'm finally getting it out to share with you all. The photo kind of gives you a hint here. And I'm not going to read the article at all, just the little text that starts it off with will sum it up. And the title, A Dog Helped an Injured Wild Crow. Now they're best friends. Mm-hmm. The two now run around together and take naps side by side. Sometimes the crow pecks on the glass door to get Miko to come outside and play. Making odd kin. We have role models out there with all beings. They don't, not limited to our own species. So that's interconnectedness. To see the world in that light. That's what we're studying here. So I try to convey these Dharma teachings, but then we have dogs and birds that have figured it out. They've got that Buddha nature already that's manifesting it. So when we chant, Dharma gates are boundless, they truly are. They might be in your backyard. So check it out. Okay. Now we can turn to some boring Dharma text, but not really boring, being facetious here. If there's anything boring, it's definitely coming from us. Always bear that in mind. So we just need to open our mind a little bit more. When I find myself encountering that situation from time to time and bringing that recognition to those experiences. Patience, one of the paramitas. So be patient with me, which you always are. So the line from what we just chanted that we're going to be focusing on tonight is immeasurable distant eons are one moment of mind. Now the fact that those last two words are attached, I found immediately kind of was what jumped out at me. Because it could have just said immeasurable distant eons are one moment. And I'd say Dogen. And as Ben points out in this chapter, yes, Dogen borrowed was heavily influenced by these teachings of the Huayan. So, yeah. And I'd say, thanks, Joe, for having our book discussion group studying Uji. But he doesn't let it go just at that. He adds of mind, one moment of mind. And I thought that was, once I zeroed in on that, I thought, what a beautiful move. To guide our perspective on this. Because when you stop just at one moment, you seem to be turning that moment into something objective, something real. But when you add of mind, all of a sudden that's pulled out of the picture. Oh, yeah. A moment is a mental phenomenon. And we can go very far back in Buddhist teachings and find a lot of early Dharma studies that are generally classified under the term Abhidharma that look into this sort of thing, about the constructs of mind. So what the author of the Song of Dharma Nature is pointing out is that time is a mental construct. So, Western thought differently, especially up until recently, at least, in terms of an objective sense of time. Time was definitely real, had its own reality. And that's kind of been let go of, recognizing that doesn't quite jive with our experience, because science remains very empirical, grounded in observation and experience. But the more observations they make, the more it becomes clear that time is not objective. Going back over 100 years to the work of Einstein, but certainly continuing still. So this notion, and from here, I'm going to leave science and go into poetry, because I always love when we can bring those both together in one Dharma talk, centered around one line. I think that's kind of covering the yin and the yang. But to my mind, that's kind of a pretty good indicator that you're into something pretty profound when you can touch both poetry and science. One without the other is kind of like the yin without the yang. Both are required. So the other thing that comes to my mind, other than Uji, when I allow my mind to go beyond formal Dharma, which I do from time to time, as you know, the other thing that immediately comes to mind is William Blake when I read something like this. Immeasurable distant eons are one moment of mind. So I thought I'd take a couple of minutes in this Dharma talk to cover some territory with William Blake, who believed that by cleansing the doors of perception, one could see the infinite within the finite, holding infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. These are lines that, it's kind of like Whitman's I am vast, I contain multitudes. Once you read something like that, it's there for the rest of your life. And these statements, and what I'm also going to share with you from Blake are similar in that regard. Once you read them, they're there. You can't, these aren't things you forget that drop out of your mind. Cleansing the doors of perception. So that's a beautiful way of seeing Zaza. Is a cleansing of the doors of perception. Through this process of letting go, non-attachment. And through such a practice, we can see immeasurable distant eons are one moment of mind. But it requires practice. This isn't the sort of text that a non-practitioner can pick up, read that line, and say, oh yeah. Quite the contrary. And say, no, those don't fit. You've got immeasurable eons, and you've got one moment. How could you say that they're the same? That logical, rational mind. Now, I'm not suggesting we throw that mind completely in the trash bin. But what I am suggesting, what Buddhist teachings are suggesting, is that we can go beyond that too. We can hold on to that part of our mind. I recommend you do, in fact. But don't be limited to it. See the truth of it. And we'll get into that aspect of it a bit more, a bit further on. And then from another work of Blake's, The Auguries of Innocence, equally well known in the world, not just the poetical world, but I'd say almost the literate world. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. To be able to see, I mean, what he's expressing is to see the divine, the Buddha nature, in the least thing. That it's not something that we need to go forth and find some other place. Because we're looking at it from the viewpoint that this is the samsaric realm. This is the realm of affliction. And I feel affliction. So I can't find that here. I can't find the divine. I can't find Buddha nature here. But this is what Dogen, William Blake, and others, many others, are pointing out is in fact the truth. That the only place you can find the divine is right here. The recurring theme in Joseph Campbell's work. It always comes back to just this, where you will find that which you're seeking, the higher ground, the purity, right in the impure, right in the impure. Of course, Jesus' teachings resonate with that as well. So Blake saw the universe as an interconnected whole, just like the Hawaiian thinkers. Although there's no reason to believe that Blake had any connection, any exposure to these Buddhist teachings. but he definitely saw the universe through a similar perspective. And he further believed that the human mind, and for him, our faculty of imagination figured so prominently. So it was through the imagination that we could reflect and connect with the divine universe. Our imagination would take us beyond our limited sensations and perceptions built upon those sensations. And Blake fervently believed that everything that lives is holy, reflecting the divine spark, or what we would term our Dharma training is reflecting Buddha nature. Just a matter of terminology. But it's pointing to the same thing, the same basic aspect of reality of our lives. So we're back to odd kin. Everything that lives is holy. Higher than just family, holy. As many here I know have some family members that maybe aren't always perceived as being particularly holy. So this designation of being holy, of divine, transcends even our normal sense of kin. That there is a deep connectedness that's always present. Whatever else is going on, circumstances that are taking place, that we're deeply connected, of the same nature, the ultimate nature. So to harm that is harming ourselves. So our vows become universal. That's a key aspect of Buddhist vows and guideposts for how we conduct ourselves in the world by universal vow. Not just taking a tribal approach or even a species-wide approach, truly universal. To see our interdependence. And that universality, that's why in many of my talks I do bring in contemporary science. It's looking more like a recent topic that I'll be delving in further in future talks, the topic of synergy in interdependence, in terms of how, when we see things in their interconnectedness, it's richer because of synergy, rather than just seeing things as individual parts. That's why there's this kind of sense of an ecstatic response to deep spiritual teachings, I think, because we begin to see things from that holistic view, so that the whole is far greater than dealing with parts, which is the way we go through our life. So it's like, my gosh, just from that change in perspective makes a huge difference. Or again, at least for me, it certainly has. So before we return to the text, one last moving earlier than Blake, but Pliny the Elder. So go back to antiquity, said that the power and majesty of nature in all its aspects is lost on one who contemplates it merely in the detail of its parts and not as a whole. Kind of anticipating complexity, theory, and synergy in our current times. So these aren't brand new teachings that science is fathoming. In many respects, as I present them here, in various Dharma talks, they're also kind of drawing from Buddhist teachings or ancient classical teachings, viewpoints. So there's a lot of well-grounded knowledge and wisdom that's accumulated over the ages that's finding its way, should be no surprise, into contemporary thought. I think myself, that's the way it should be. That, again, gives me a kind of reaffirmation that we seem to be on the right path. So Ben, in his commentary on this line, makes the statement that it's hard to see that every moment is all time and all time is one moment. Like I was saying earlier, for a non-practitioner, almost impossible to see because you have to practice. So yes, it very much is hard to see the truth of this. And if you're not doing Zazen, as Blake points to, imagination as the path. I can see that, but you'd really have to engage that imagination to be able to get to that realization. And for those of us who are in this book discussion group, and it's always open, so the last Monday of every month, and it's remote only, virtual only. So wherever you're located, you're more than welcome to join in. And this line that's being discussed here is really kind of what we're studying. Being time, from Dogen's perspective. And as Ben puts it, if this moment can only be possible within immeasurable distant eons, exactly as they were, how can we say they are different things? And this is bringing us, and I want to kind of pause here and look at this further, because this is bringing us up to some key terminology in the Dharma that's also hard to get. It's hard to see through. Terms such as suchness, no going or coming. And also kind of putting it in slightly different terminology, seeing everything at once, but moment after moment. That's what's being discussed here. And that's suchness. So suchness in this moment, what brings this moment? How does it arise? What's being described, the, this endless expanse of time, is no different than this moment. They're the same thing. Everything coming together to create this moment. From the Big Bang through everything. All the laws of physics and chemistry and everything that took shape. And the whole course of human history. And everything else creates this moment. And so it will be with the next moment and the next moment. So these teachings of interdependence, just like William Blake's vision, are pretty profound. Profound for the mind to take in, but equally profound in terms of the way we go forth understanding these teachings, the way we go forth into the world and live our lives. With this sense of suchness. So, immeasurable distant eons, just as they were. Everything just as it is. Bringing this moment into presence. So, and now let's take a turn into the, for John and I, having done the Heart Sutra retreat a couple of weeks ago, this is still rattling through us. But I think we chant the Heart Sutra enough here to where it should be rattling through everybody all the time anyway. But the understanding, and I'll use Ben's words here, that an instant has no essence, just as the lengthy epochs have no essence. That's the teaching of emptiness. No essence, no essential nature. No fixed nature. No thingness. So this is also something in common between this moment and the measureless eons. No essence, emptiness runs through all of them. And then we get to the line that was mentioned earlier before we even had our sitting about moments have no boundaries. And that's a powerhouse line, I think, to really get into what's being expressed here. The fact that moments don't have boundaries. And I think we're kind of helped along in that with the addition of mind to the line that we're looking at of immeasurable distant eons are one moment of mind. Because boundaries we tend to think of in the objectified world. And they come into play, they serve such a vital purpose because we need to be able to distinguish one thing from another. How do we do that? By boundaries we create. But those boundaries are of mind. And essence is pointing to something that transcends mind. No, this is its essential nature. So this is why saying an instant has no essence, nor do lengthy epochs, is, as I said earlier in this talk, the fact that time is not an objective thing. An objective thing has boundaries, pretty much by definition, I think. It's what makes it objective. We can define it. If you can't define it, it can't be objective. Maybe it goes into some fuzzy realm that we can't clearly say it's objective yet. We have no idea what its essence is, but there's something weird going on out there. Like dark matter and dark energy, right? There's something going on. But don't ask us about its boundaries or objectivity. So where this is leading us then is to this notion not of things, but of flow. And that brings us to contemporary thought as well. Although maybe it's going back 30 or more years ago, but there was a book written by a psychologist titled Flow that became very influential in terms of describing our experience and how we attain heightened states of awareness when we're in a state of flow, which also is kind of, it's zazen, it's practice, it's mindfulness practice, just becoming one with an activity. So you can be doing work practice during a retreat and experience that kind of flow. Just be the washing of this dish, and self drops out. It's self that objectifies the activity. But if the sense of self drops out, there is only the activity left. And this sense of time, we then experience kind of the dropping off of boundaries. What's our sense of time when we're in a flow state? We have no sense of time. A couple hours could pass, and it seems almost like maybe not quite an instant, but closer to that end of the time spectrum. Time kind of just drops away. When we're in that flow state. And that's the state we're in. We're in a flow state. But we don't typically see it that way because we're kind of conditioned and just in the routine of constantly seeing things as separate with borders and dealing with things accordingly. So the flow states are all too rare. Music is a good example of a place where we can drop into those states. So that's why I avail myself of, of live performances to the degree I do. To get cut right to the heart of the matter, I mean, that's really, it's another form of zazen. Just become one with what's the sound that's coming forth. And certainly any sense of time, boundaries that way, drop off. So, and in Ann Arbor, I'm not to tell you which artist, but at the end of a performance, it's like, how's she done? Come back to the world of time. No way. Because time had just no sense of it. So this sense of flow, when we can see it in our own lives, in our own experience, but now we can also take the perspective, make it broader, and see things like within biology and geology, how species, what we might and at one time did in fact see as being fixed, talking about boundaries. These species were as they were. And Christianity, at least I know, kind of locked right into that too. It could tie into the teachings of the Bible about God creating. That's how they came about. And if God created it, can't change. So they were fixed. And how about geological entities, mountains, especially? They were pretty fixed, right? But now we see species are fading in and out of existence constantly. And geological formations, ditto. So there's flow, but maybe on a time frame, it's much slower now. So we don't perceive. We're operating at a different kind of time frame. But the reality is, all these things we see as being fixed, like this structure here, it'll have a pretty short lifespan. We're just in the flow of this space with the flow of our own lives. So I have all these flows intersecting, creating this moment. But they're nothing but flows. They're not these fixed entities that we are programmed, like I was saying, to see the world as being constituted by. Everything is flow. We've talked about this before in the sense of reality being a verb, not a noun. It's active. That's its nature. Buddha nature is active. The Buddhist teaching for that is impermanence. Impermanence simply means flow, active. It's Heraclitus. You can't step into the same river twice. So these are some of the key Buddhist teachings that are contained in that simple line that this chapter is commenting on. So I have a couple of other points I could talk about, but we're getting down to about the final 10, 15 minutes. So then I want to leave enough time for you all to ask your questions or sharing comments you might have. So let me bow out here and open this up. John?
Just a simple comment that I never really thought that much about before is just our sense of time in the you talked about it with flow, but think about how it changes with age. You got a half hour when you're a little kid to go out and play. Wow, half hour, so plenty of time. I have a half hour now, I think, do I really want to start something? It's a real different perception of time. And there's lots of different ones over if you look at them.
Yeah. Reminds me, talk about teachings that settle in. Back in my college days, I had a philosophy professor who taught the 3 times: subjective time, what you're talking about; objective time, the 30 minutes; and the time of great historical events, like the time we're in now. History. And this is a fabricated notion of time that we kind of construct around particular periods and things that seem important to us. But of course, things that we consider important, like the year 1776, which we're going to be celebrating quite a bit next year. But other parts of the globe, what? Not so much. So these are hardly universal perspectives, the time of great events. Even things that are really big deals to us, like the fall of the Roman Empire. And to the Chinese, what's the big deal? Yeah, subjective, objective, very big deal, very big deal. I know Joe's about to ask something because he's looking at his book.
Yeah, there was something here I tripped over while you were talking about it, and I wanted to find it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, forgive me, I didn't know you were waiting.
No, that's okay. If anybody else has.
It was something about experiencing time, experiencing the past, because we experience the past, it's a memory and so forth.
Right.
The question that arose was, if we're not experiencing it, if there wasn't a human around actually experiencing time,
right,
would time still flow, and what would that be like? Would it keep a cadence? I mean, the rocks in the ocean go back and forth until they're ground down in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
Time must be real, not just a mental phenomena from that perspective.
It's the structure of time that we bring to it. So, and maybe we can, I'm a believer in the power of sci-fi and maybe this is pointing to the role of imagination that Blake uses so well. But to be able to imagine different beings from other parts of the universe that might see time in a completely different way. In fact, there was a sci-fi film, maybe I'm sure it's over 10 years ago now, called Arrival, that is about time and this alien force that comes and makes contact. And they have a very different view of time that kind of speaks to this, the eons in this moment, because they can see time in its entirety. And that's powerful. That's what I love about sci-fi, is it's kind of opens our mind to different perspectives.
But the ultimate reality of time.
Well, see, there is no ultimate reality. That's what I'm trying to
What would
point to.
Old Faithful do?
Do what it's going to do, but we structure that. That's what we bring to it. The subjective side that John was speaking to. So even what we call objective time, in its roots, that's also subjective. We add that on. Even causality, we add on. And even Western philosophy came to realize that. That was kind of the big thing that Kant contributed to Western thought, was his notion of what he termed, to create a complicated term for it, the synthetic a priori. A priori said it was before experience, but synthetic meant that you were adding things rather than just analytic, where you would just deduce from what you were given. So you're not adding anything, you're just deducing things from what you already know. So synthetic a priori was his take on things like causality. And he termed time as an intuition. Space and time were intuitions, ours. They weren't ultimate. They weren't ultimate.
So if humans run around to impugn whatever we do onto time so it behaves like this, and you're saying time would not exist?
Not what we call time. So this sense of ultimate existence, we don't have a tie-in with that. That's why another aspect of sci-fi that, as you all know, I'm fond of pointing to, is the one that it's made kind of like the Matrix. All of this could be complete fabrication. We could just be, computer simulation. An earlier philosopher, before computers became all the rage, called it a brain in a vat. That could be the metaphysical reality. We can't tell. So that's kind of based in the Buddhist teaching of not knowing. Not knowing. And it also resonates with Buddha's teaching about staying away from these metaphysical speculations. They serve no purpose. They are literally kind of like mind games.
Well, I'm no mathematician, but I have heard that quantum mechanics is the only branch of physics that doesn't include time in the formulas. And I had to go back and reread an old book of Isaac Asimov's called The End of Eternity, because he gets there somehow.
Yeah. I'll be interested in hearing about it. And I may have even read it. I read a lot of his stuff, but that was like 50 years ago. So yeah. My retention of it isn't the greatest. For sure.
I was even thinking about, as you were talking about time, I mean, there's all these cycles in the universe of the sun going around, the earth going around the sun, the comets and all of that. But all of that changes over time. So using that as a marker, there really isn't. I mean, it's a changeable marker.
Right. It's close enough. It's all geared towards serving our purposes. So it's close enough until all of a sudden we realize maybe our needs have become more refined. So we begin to see that it's not as exact. You know, we wouldn't have needed to understand Einstein's relativity until we had all these satellites circling. If we didn't have relativity, we wouldn't have GPS, because the triangulation that allows the satellites have to take into account Einstein's theory of relativity. We'd be going, why are all these calculations not fitting? But until we get to that point, see, I mean, Newtonian physics was working just fine. But then when we make these advances in scientific discovery, that enables the technology, and then the technology finally sees, oh, damn, it confirms the scientific theory. That, yeah, it all ties together. But then, it ties together so well, we can't account for what, 95% of the universe. So there's still quite a few loose ends, to be sure. So who knows, once to tie it all together, who knows what time will look like. But the important thing is to see that our view of time is nothing at all like the ultimate. And it's speaking about subject to change. Totally. I mean, as to also point out that this chapter speaks to the fact that time and space, being both empty, they are one. That's Einstein's space-time. He combined the term. So that was a pretty big change.
Everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah. Good cinema and good good way of seeing the world. Yeah. But yeah, be really careful about setting up things as the ultimate. Is my main response to that. But that doesn't mean that we totally dismiss these things, because they work. They accomplish things for us. So they're of use. They're of value. But where we go wrong is when we turn those types of truths into ultimate truths. That's why Buddhism has this distinction: conventional truth, ultimate truth. And that's something, what we generally term truth is all conventional truth. And to see it in that way. And conventions change. So truths in that realm change. We know that. One of the benefits of studying history is to see that whole process as it plays out in every era. It would be a truly stagnant era if it didn't play out. But if it's an era that the flow is still at a nice, healthy clip, that's part of flow. Is that the conventions are constantly changing, along with the geological formations and the biological formations. The conventions are just the same, always changing. So just by throwing the term ultimate out there, we're kind of digging in on what's truly conventional.
I was also thinking about the fact that we have yet to get quantum mechanics and relativity in the same equation.
Yeah.
So they are relative. No pun intended.
For now. until something comes along and supplants them both,
Till the next Einstein comes along.
like a string theory. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows where it's going to go? I sure don't. Well, was there any other burning questions? And let's go ahead and, oh, Rannigan. You're muted.
I'll wait till next week. Okay.
Are you sure?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Should be back at the channel. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that purifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Good night, everybody. We'll be back on Saturday morning.